Have you heard that nutrition impacts your mental health, but you really don't understand how or why, and not even sure if you even really trust that that's true? Well, join us today. Myself and Kaylee Noland, who is Sage's resident nutritionist, is going to get into the nitty-gritty about this so that you leave with an understanding of how what you put into your body directly impacts how your brain is functioning. I look forward to hearing in the comments below what was helpful about this. Again, my name is Emily Sellis, and I'm the host for the Sage Holistic Show. We're so happy to have you here. Sage is a 501c3 nonprofit organization building community by providing education and counseling about physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. We encourage all of our listeners to find their own path to what holistic wellness means to you.
So I'm Kaylee Noland, and I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner, which is basically a holistic functional nutritionist. I got my bachelor's degree in nutrition from Point Loma Nazarene University. And from there, I kind of wanted to take the more holistic route of nutrition. So I found out about nutritional therapy, and it spoke to me, and I knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I finished that program, and I was, looking in the nutritional therapy industry, and I found Sage, and I actually minored in pre-therapeutic psychology in college, and with my nutrition as my major. And I just saw the heavy connection between mental health and nutrition. And so when I saw Sage, that they were a holistic health center with therapy and nutrition and spirituality, I was like, this is the perfect place. Like, they're finally combining all these things into one because they're so connected. And I loved their mission, and I was like, I have to work here. And then here I am now at Sage.
I know. We are so glad that you found us. It did feel like this perfect kind of coming together. And we do have a really strong mental health focus. We have 7 therapists at Sage. And having you join us as our resident nutritionist is just a wonderful thing. There's already been some collaboration. I know you've been meeting the other therapists and kind of getting connected and in the community and all the good that's going to be able to happen. I also love that you have that bachelor's background in nutrition. It's a real solid foundation in addition to the nutritional therapy training that you have. And I love today. Are you still there? Oh, there you are. Okay, it just paused for a sec. What we're going to be talking about today for our audience is this connection between mental health specifically and nutrition. I mean, of course, there's so many things that nutrition can do, and I'm sure, Kaylee, you could talk to us for days about that. Right. But what we want to really focus on was that mental health component and how what we have at our fingertips through nutrition it's so accessible to us if we can educate ourselves about what we need to do, where we need to even start, and then how to stay on track with that. So we're going to really be covering that. I wanted to start off because I love statistics, and I think it's important just to bring awareness because, the two things, depression and anxiety, and then of course there's a plethora of other, mental illnesses that someone could be dealing with at any given time. But these are the two most common. And looking at the stats for the United States, we have 18.1% of the population, adult population. So I'm not even talking about our adolescents and our children. That's 40 million adults that are dealing with an anxiety disorder. So anxiety disorders can be something very simple. A lot of people like to just even use the word stress, like experiencing a lot of stress. And so being able to understand when it's something that's impacting you more than just stress or chronic stress, although that can be part of anxiety, but really looking at when that becomes like an anxiety disorder. And that differentiation has to do more with how much it's impacting you in your daily life. So if you are experiencing stress and then it's manageable, and you can kind of do some self-care or some winding down or some like going and connecting with friends or going on a run or doing something like that, and you feel like you're managing it, then that's how stress is impacting you. And of course, there's also things that we can do for our nervous system and through nutrition that Kaylee's going to be covering today that's going to help with that. But when it turns into an anxiety disorder is when this becomes heightened and it's more extensive and it's more pervasive, and it's not something that you can necessarily easily kind of recover from that quickly, and it just kind of stays with you. And one of the primary things of anxiety, you guys, is avoidance. That is the number one thing that anyone with anxiety does. So it very well can be, and is, and does happen, that people who have anxiety disorders are not even aware of it. So the A in SAGE stands for awareness. It's a big component of what we are all about, is to create that awareness, because without that awareness, we are not able to create change, which is something that we are all, if you're here and you're listening, that is something that you are all about. So anxiety is really impacting, and it's very treatable. And I know, Kaylee, you kind of pulled a statistic that I thought was interesting with regards to medication, antidepressant medication, which is also used for anxiety. Antidepressants can be utilized for anxiety. Do you want to share with everyone what that statistic was?
Yeah. So I found that 13.2% of Americans aged 18 and over reported taking antidepressant medication in the past 30 days. And this statistic was from 2018. So we can assume it's gone up since then, because Americans are taking 34% more anxiety meds since the coronavirus pandemic started, from a study I saw. So really, mental health is in the background of what's been going on in the past couple of years. It's on the rise. More people are, looking for anxiety medications, depression medications. So it's
absolutely. And I think, one of the reasons why, and I want to hear your thoughts on this too, but one of the reasons why medication is so utilized, and by the way, like segues, like I'm not saying medication is bad, because sometimes people will think because we're a holistic center that we're like anti-medication, and we're not necessarily anti-medication. We're pro you getting what you need to get where you need to go and to reach your goals and to have that life that is your best life that feels sustainable. But being able to look at and have an awareness around like the medication usage that is going on, and if there's alternatives, right? If there could be something like exercise or nutrition that can be replaced by that medication, or lowering that dose of medication, because with medications, there's side effects, as we all know, right? And so being able to look at that with the medication and say, like, what are those replacement behaviors that we could do or to add to create more of a support for ourselves in that. Also looking at depression, I also pulled the statistics with that as well. I mean, anxiety is the most prevalent mental illness in the US, but with depression, that's also impacting over 17 million adults in the United States. And that was from 2017. So again, with those stats that Kaylee brought in, that is also on the rise. And it's something that's an epidemic. And if we're not looking at these other ways to kind of help ourselves, we're just going to keep doing that fast-paced, busy life, popping those pills and not really taking care of what's underneath. And that's really the crux of what we're talking about today, is what's underneath that with this approach. So Kaylee, if you could share with us, like, how is nutritional therapy different than just typical nutrition, or someone who's like focusing on weight loss, for example, and thinking that that's nutrition as well? Like, just kind of, if you can talk about those different things.
Yeah, totally. So nutritional therapy is kind of looking at the root cause of certain things that are going on. Take heartburn, for example. It's regular nutrition would tell you, oh, don't eat spicy foods or go grab the Tums, where as nutritional therapy is kind of looking at the digestive system as a whole and trying to figure out, why are you getting heartburn? Are you stressed? What foods specifically are affecting it? And it's kind of a more bio-individual approach where people aren't cookie cutter. We're taking the individual, we're taking in account of so many different things, what they specifically eat in a day, what their stress life is like, what their exercise routine is like, looking at their mental health. And so, it's nutritional therapy is more bio-individual and kind of looking at like the root cause and seeing how we can support them through that.
Awesome. Yeah. And that I love that term bio individual, because I think that is something that's super unique. It's not just a follow this protocol for this diet, or, even like the government, like food pyramid,
Yeah.
just like do this, right? Like that's
Right.
something
Yeah.
that I learned
Yeah.
growing up.
Yeah, and that doesn't work for everyone. It's a lot of nutrition, like what more Western nutrition is, oh, you need to eat this to be healthy. You must do this to be healthy. Whereas nutrition isn't a one size fits all. And, the scale doesn't necessarily determine health either. And so we're kind of looking at it bio individually, and not just, one rule is law.
Right. Yeah. So as an NTP, what's the acronym, right? Like, how do you assess someone's bioindividuality? Like, if someone's listening here and saying, yeah, I know that nagging in the back of my mind, I really need to focus on my nutrition.
Yeah.
How is she going to assess me uniquely as my bioindividual kind of print?
Yeah. So what we do is I have them fill out an initial interview questionnaire, and that's just kind of putting down some like history of their health, what their top goals are, what their concerns are on a nutrition level. And then I'm also having them fill out a food and mood journal. And this journal kind of analyzes your reactions to what you're eating and how your digestive reactions are, how your, mental mood reactions are to what you're eating. And I also do some interviewing. I also have you fill out a nutritional assessment questionnaire. And this questionnaire is basically a symptom questionnaire. It's listing certain things such as, oh, I have heartburn, or, oh, I crash at 3 p.m. And from there, this nutritional assessment questionnaire shows me which system in your body needs the most support. So for some people, it could be blood sugar regulation. Some people, it could be digestion. Some people, it could be hormone regulation. And from there, I kind of make a plan for you specifically, and I bounce ideas off you and give you nutritional recommendations as well as herbal supplement recommendations that go along with it.
That's awesome. So I know this is such a thorough assessment that you do. Like initially when someone is reaching out to start with you, there's even like a week of preparation, like completing this over 200 questionnaire, very, very dialed down to that person. And then the food and mood journal. And I think there's a couple other things that you have your clients fill out prior to even that initial assessment.
Exactly.
So, yeah. And that initial assessment, I think, is 75 minutes, right? So it's, again, a thorough approach. And then what does it look like from there for someone to work with you?
Right. Yeah. So from there, during the initial assessment, I gather all their paperwork they filled out, and I kind of mark it up and have specific questions and kind of analyze how they are nutritionally and what my recommendations would be, and, have them meet me where they are. And I try to set goals for them, and short-term goals, long-term goals, and try to just better their health in general, whatever support they need help with.
Yeah, that support is priceless, to have that person that you're accountable for. I love that. Thank you for sharing a bit. I just think not everyone knows about nutritional therapy, and I think it's so important to show that they're, again, like getting information and education around the other ways to provide some support for someone's nutrition. But kind of back to the food that we eat, the nutrition and the mood. I know I had read this book called Food and Mood, and they talked a lot in that book about having false emotions, which of course, as a therapist, I'm like, yeah, what is a false emotion? I thought you have to validate your emotions and you have to know that they're real. And, it's so interesting to gain this knowledge that you have and that you're going to share with us about this, of how your mood is something that is very impacted by the foods that you put into your body. And so I wanted you to be able to talk a little bit about that, like how would we know whether it's like a true emotion for like a stress or a situation that we're dealing with versus my nutrition is off?
Right.
So please share.
For sure. Yeah. So it depends. I would personally assess your diet that day and ask yourself the questions: have you eaten nutrient dense foods today? Have they made you feel better just while you're eating the foods, comforting it short term, or how's your digestion after? Do you feel bloated? Do you have heartburn? Do you have brain fog? Have you skipped a meal? Do you feel as though, you're crashing because it's a blood sugar issue? How is your stress level? And from there, ask yourself those tough questions and kind of, people know, like, have you eaten whole foods today? And basically just asking yourselves those hard questions.
Yeah, I think that for a new beginner, like to nutrition, someone who's newly learning about this, I feel like I've kind of been on this journey, me personally, since, 2011, when I realized I had gluten sensitivity, right? And I was like, my whole world was like, I can't do this. This is so hard. And dairy, and I still struggle with it. Nutrition is something I have to personally put a lot of effort into. It's not something that comes easily to me. Like for, I mean, I know you still work at it too, but we all have our niches, like for things that we really focus on. But back then, even like just trying to learn about something new, or even trying to understand the subtleties that my body was experiencing, I feel like that is quite a challenge. And I think what I'm hearing you say is the curiosity, right? Like being able to ask those questions and have a person that you can go to ask those questions and really reflect on, I don't know, how did I feel? Did I have brain fog? I don't really know. And like, so it becomes this huge experiment for your life, for your individual body, for how you can feel better. And sometimes it's really apparent, like you can eat something really greasy and feel really not good. And so you can have that experience of like, I don't feel good after that. Or it might be more subtle and you don't really know until you've had some time with that food or some time off of that food.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think some people have just become so used to being bloated and having heartburn and having brain fog that they don't even know that they have it at some point, because so it's just normal. It's part of life. Oh, this just happens after I eat. Where I think just the awareness of that, like, oh wow, like I don't feel bloated after eating this meal, or oh, I don't have heartburn.
Right. And you don't know that until you have the duality to compare it to. Gosh, that's it's so interesting. I mean, I feel like last year, 2020, in January, I did Whole30 for the first time of my life. And so just before that, like basically exercise has been a thing for me where I really got into that and learned how to utilize that as a stress management to, help my mental health. I always was saying like, I got to go for my run or get my weights in because it's my Prozac, right? Like this is like so important to me. And then just having kids and getting off that routine, I did this kind of test. I'm like, I'm going to try Whole30 and see if I can achieve the same mental health results. And I was floored. I had never felt so clear-headed or just good, like mental clarity and just physically feeling well. And sometimes you don't have that experience until you do something. And it was hard. I mean, you've probably I know you've done the Whole30, right? I mean, maybe you've done it many times, but it's a challenge. But when we challenge ourselves, we take ourselves to the next level and we're able to really learn about ourselves.
Yeah. And it's not easy. It's not easy to have that discipline and say, I'm going to experiment with this and see if my mood and how I'm physically feeling changes from diet. It's not easy to change those habits because processed, like modern day American foods are so, they taste good and you don't want to give them up. The amount of sugar that's in foods today compared to, 50 years ago. I mean, refined sugar was originally a scarce luxury enjoyed by the wealthy, but as production grew cheaper, the amount of sugar consumed has drastically grown in the past few centuries, from people eating a few pounds of sugar a year to 150 pounds a year.
Wow, that is crazy numbers. I mean, and then I know there's so many health effects of consuming more sugar too. And I don't know if that's part of what you wanted to get into today, but I mean, that would be great to share about that, like that difference between whole foods and processed foods and why that's even important.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's I mean, if you take a look at any processed food in the grocery store and you look at the ingredients list, some form of sugar, whether it's corn syrup or brown sugar or refined white sugar, is usually within the first two ingredients. And people don't even realize this. They don't, you know, and it's not their fault. It's just how marketing is and how the food industry makes money, because sugar's addictive and that affects our mental health as well. And it's just all connected.
It is. I know that, and that sugar, I think, leading to like long-term use, leading to diabetes or other kinds of health conditions. I'm not medically trained, so I can't speak to all of those different medical conditions.
Right.
Maybe
Yeah.
more to add to that list, but
Yeah,
it
totally.
really does debilitate us long term.
Yeah, I think, diabetes has gone up drastically from the past, century as well. And a lot of people, young people, are even having blood sugar dysregulation at our age, and they're not even, again, it's the awareness. They're not even aware because, oh, it's normal to crash at 3 p.m. or, oh, it's
Mhm.
normal not to have energy, right after I eat this. And they become used to it, and pretty soon you don't even notice it after you've been doing it for so many years.
Yeah, so it's hard to wake up from that. It's hard to really like start to recognize and even like where is that impetus for change? Like what is it that pushes people towards that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's just you have to take a step back and like put your health as a priority, and exercise is part of that, mental health support is part of that, and nutrition's part of that. And they all work off each other and go together, and it's just taking a step back and wanting to feel better and wanting to be better and do better. And it's almost like putting yourself first in a way, and not letting the stressors of society take over, and taking a minute for yourself and doing something for
Mhm.
yourself, whether it's for exercise, nutrition, or mental health support.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of people have a hard time doing that, but I think even more importantly, that busy life, I mean, this is really what Sage is about, is like learning to slow down all these things that you're talking
Right.
about and really pay attention to what works well for you. And what we want to do is really talk about and educate people of how to prevent problems from happening in our future. I mean, the writing is on the
Right.
wall. When we look at science and we look at what has happened, history repeats itself, right? Like, how can we
Yeah.
be preventative and come in there with guns blazing to change our lives right now before we're dealing with illness down the road, or shortened lifespans, or just not
Exactly.
feeling well. So, I mean, these are all really big motivators and reasons for us to take care of ourselves and to take a moment to really understand how our bodies can feel better. And if you don't know, if you're in that place of like, I don't know, or I don't think so, I mean, it's a fun experiment to like
Right.
to challenge yourself. Like, can you feel 5% better or 10% better or 30% better, depending on how your body individually responds to this work, the work of
Right.
eating the whole foods versus the processed foods.
Right.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about some of these things that are in whole foods that you're talking about that
Yeah.
help with mental health.
Totally. Yeah. So basically, the first step to eating better is just eating whole foods and not grabbing the convenience foods that are processed. Late in the last century or so, the food industry has drastically changed, and so has, like, there's been an uprise in mental anxiety and depression and other mental health things as well. And I think the food industry, the rise of big food, although that may have not been their intention, big food companies such as the ones like Coke, Kellogg's, Nestle, are high in sugar and low in cost, and they're convenient and they taste good and they're easy. And people don't think about the long-term effects of physical or mental health when eating those things. And just something as simply as eating whole foods versus those sort of foods would make a huge difference on your mental health. And everyone is familiar with the phrase, you are what you eat. And a lot of people think of this on a more physical level, but I think people are becoming more aware that what they're eating and what their diet looks like and how certain foods can affect their mood and digestion and energy levels. And it's not just gaining weight. It's way more than that.
Yeah, no, that is really important. So kind of looking at where you're getting your foods is very important. What about those vitamins? And when you talk about nutrient dense foods, like
Yes.
what is it that you're referring to, or what are some examples of that?
Yeah, so some nutrient dense foods is just like trying to get foods from the best source. So pasture raised eggs, wild caught salmon, olive oil, avocado oil, foods just in their most natural form and from the best source as possible. I think these foods are more nutrient rich in vitamins, and B vitamins are especially helpful for mental health. B vitamins are vital for the synthesis of neurotransmitters and making serotonin. And when you're eating whole foods, you're getting a bigger chunk of these vitamins, and they're more bioavailable.
Yeah.
This is when you're eating the processed foods and everything. So some B vitamins, B2, riboflavin, B12, B6, and riboflavin. Actually, a study analyzed the effects of various B vitamins on symptoms related to depression appearing during adolescence. And Japanese scientists that worked on the study analyzed more than 3,000 boys and 3,400 girls from high schools in 2 cities. And the research involved a questionnaire filled by the participants. And basically, they found that people who were eating more whole foods and had B2 in their diets did not have anxiety and depression, and people who were eating the more processed foods that were lacking, like B vitamins as well, did have these unfortunate anxieties and depression.
That's awesome. So what Kaylee's talking about, for any of you guys who have just joined us, is she's sharing about how B vitamins are crucial to mental health. A little fly right here. They're crucial for the photosynthesis of neurotransmitters and serotonin. And she was just talking about a study that showed the benefits of that. So what else is there that you would say is really important for mental health when it comes to vitamins or nutrient dense foods and such?
Yeah. So a lot of the times we think of like, vitamins being good for mental health and everything too, but our hormones actually affect our mental health as well. And cortisol, our biggest stress hormone, is also affected by the things we eat. You wouldn't think it would be, but what we eat balances our hormones. And when our hormones aren't balanced, our cortisol spikes. And again, this is our biggest stress hormone. And this can long-term affect anxiety and depression, because when we're spewing out cortisol all the time, this affects our anxiety because we're in a fight or flight phase all the time and we're anxious, and the food sugar spikes cortisol. And if we're constantly eating processed carbohydrates or sugar all day, our cortisol is just going to be spiking nonstop, and it's going to affect how we feel and our anxiety levels, and long term could be a cause for some mental depression or anxiety.
So you're saying with cortisol being affected by what we eat, for example, sugar or like really high carbohydrate dense foods, what happens after that cortisol spikes? So it increases our hormone, and then are you saying it crashes, and that's what dysregulates us?
Yes, exactly. So cortisol and blood sugar regulation kind of go hand in hand. So when our cortisol spikes, our insulin spikes, and then the pancreas freaks out and sends in the glucose, and then it drops again, and then our cortisol drops again. But our body kind of went into a state of panic, and this causes stress, this causes anxiety, and our cortisol in our bloodstream is still really high from that spike. So if we're doing this all day long, our blood sugar and cortisol are going to be going like this, and that's going to affect our anxiety levels.
Gosh, yeah, so much energy goes to managing that instead of just living, right?
Right.
Instead of, getting through our day, which is also a challenge sometimes with all the different stressors that we face. So
Totally.
that's really helpful to kind of go over that, those B vitamins and cortisol. Are there any other things that you want to point out that for
Yeah.
specifically mental health?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously B vitamins are very important. Important. Cortisol affects long term. Um, Elevated cortisol level increases one's risk of depression, but also importantly, the gut and brain connection is very important to mental health. There's been a lot of talk about gut health lately, and people don't realize that the gut and brain are in constant communication with one another, and the bacteria in the gut um, is in communication and creates neurotransmitters that are in direct communication with our brain. So if one has leaky gut or gut dysbiosis, it's going to affect the neurotransmitters and the communication that our brain and gut have with each other.
Hmm. I mean, how would you say, like, if someone eats a pretty like clean diet or lots of whole foods, but then let's say they only eat like every once in a while, not so good, does it throw off the whole system, or is there room for error here? I mean, as far as like the good, the better, or the best kind
Right.
of
Yeah,
idea.
there's always room for error. Like, no one's going to be perfect. We're all human. Like, I'm not perfect either by any means. And there is room for error. The gut is very forgiving, actually. And it's just basically making habits at the end of the day, making a habit of eating better. But that doesn't mean you can't splurge once in a while. Life's too short to just be on a strict regimen, like constantly. You can't do that. You can't live like
Right.
that. So the gut is forgiving, and people can, switch their bacteria microbiome from good to bad,
Right.
depending on, how bad it is.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, it's forgiving, but it's all about making habits at the end of the day.
I think that's really important. Yeah, it's all about making habits. Not that we can't just like kind of eat foods that are not necessarily healthy for us, but like where we're looking at the majority of what we eat and what we're putting in our body, at least there's a focus of what it is, and we're being
Right.
very aware and intentional about that. Are there any like when it comes to gut health, is there and how do you assess for that in
Yeah.
your kind of bio individual approach, and how do you assess for that?
Yeah, totally. So there's actually a test people can take using their stool. They send it into a lab, and then the lab will send me the results, and it'll show me how their gut health is in general, which bacteria is ruling the gut, and even parasites, if there's some sort of parasite in the gut as well. Certain symptoms are indicative of gut health as well, such as skin health, even, or digestion, upset, bloating, heartburn, all of that.
Wow. Yeah.
Any digestive issues are indicative of gut dysbiosis as well. But yeah, I mean, eating probiotic rich food and taking a spore based probiotic is very helpful for your gut health and creating that good gut bacteria and feeding your gut with prebiotics and probiotics. Prebiotics are what feed the probiotics in the gut. And
Hmm.
just taking care of that and keeping hydrated and stuff like that.
Awesome. So, as far as the testing goes, to kind of get an idea of what is going on in the gut, but
Right.
I mean, also what you've been talking about is like what is it that our gut, how is our gut feeling? Like intuitively knowing how we're feeling after we eat
Right.
certain things, because we're not going to be doing a stool test every
No,
day, right?
no, yeah, no, that would be
Baseline. Yeah, I know. Thank you for doing that, for being willing.
oh,
But
yeah, no.
being able to really see how we feel.
Right.
I have a little question from Shannon. Hey, Shannon, it's so good to see you. Shannon
Oh,
is the one that I did the whole 30 with. She was on the journey,
right.
and she taught me so much about what are those things called? The blenders? I forget.
Nutritional?
Shannon. What is it? Not the Nutribullet. It's like the bigger one that she was like, she totally helped me get set up with. I was so grateful. Yes. Yeah. That's what it is. I'm like, I use that thing every day.
That's still. Yes.
But yeah, she says, hello, ladies. How do you know which vitamin brands are best? There's so many options and they aren't regulated. That's an awesome question for Kaylee.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So I would always look for vitamins from whole foods rather than ones that are been processed. So if you look at the label, it'll usually like say, I think Vitamin Code has some whole food vitamins. Basically, your body is able to absorb it better when it comes from whole foods versus just putting the pure vitamin together in a lab, because those are heavily processed and oxidized. But when it's coming from a whole food source, not only will you be able to better absorb it, it's less processed as well.
And are there certain brands that you have already done the research on that you know are coming from whole foods? Because I think sometimes even being able to look at that like can be confusing. So I'm just curious if you have any that you work with.
Yeah, so I work with standard process. Those you can't buy in the grocery store. Only people who are chiropractors or nutritional therapy practitioners are able to sell them to their clients. And this brand comes from like a small farm on Wisconsin. They grow their own food and make their own vitamins. They've been doing it for, I think, 120 years. And that's what I take every day. And that's what my family and all my friends take. I've sold them on that. And that's my favorite brand. And I give those to my clients and everything. And the herbs and food that are in the supplements are in the purest form and not processed. So that's my favorite brand. But also Vitamin Code, if you want to just pick one up in the grocery store really quick, has a great processing as well. They're from small farms as well. But
What was that other one? I'm going to kind of type that in the comments below here for people that are watching or maybe check this out later.
Yeah, so standard process is the ones that I sell, but you can only get them from a licensed chiropractor or nutritional therapy practitioner, and Vitamin Code.
Vitamin Code, and that would be like at any local kind of health food store.
Right, like a Whole Foods or a Sprouts.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great question. And yes, it was the Vitamix. I saw her comment over here. Great. Well, I think we've covered a lot today when it comes to mental health. You've given some ideas of how people can pay attention to their gut, how people can start to experiment with their own bodies and how foods are impacting them, kind of to this being aware of those subtleties. And you also talked to us about B12 or vitamin B and cortisol specifically. Are there any other things that you want to share with us before we kind of finish up our SAGE chat today?
Yeah, I mean, it's just important to note that nutritional therapy practitioners are not licensed to treat mental health conditions, but could offer support as an adjunct to the care of an appropriately trained therapist and everything. But we're not licensed to treat it all. We just support through whole foods, herbal supplements, and lifestyle changes.
Absolutely. That is a good point. And I think this is what works really well with SAGE. I know we do a lot of consultation with each other as a group and kind of come together. We also are very connected in the Orange County area with other therapists. And so that's always something that, cross referrals and going back and forth. If you have your own therapist, but you also want to work with Kaylee, you could sign a release to be able to speak with Kaylee or for your therapist to speak with Kaylee. And we can just work together to create your unique approach to your health and wellness. So that's what we are all about here at SAGE. Kaylee, I'm so grateful that you and I could come on, that I could finally introduce you like in person to the public. And I know we'll be seeing lots more of you and learning more from you. I did want to add that we are going to have a blog up from Kaylee on this topic. So if you would like to read a little bit more, learn more, or as always, you can go ahead and reach out to us and schedule an intake session and really just get going on this part of your health. So we would love for you guys to do that. I'm putting the information in here on the bottom for us, for our website, for you guys to visit us and to get that scheduled. But thank you so much. Cheers to good health and good nutrition and mental health.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you for spending some of your time today with us at SAGE Holistic Health and Wellness Center.
If you like what we're all about, please consider supporting our nonprofit organization by making a tax-deductible donation. To do this, you can go to our website at www.sagewellnessctr.org and click on Donate in the upper right-hand corner. We look forward to spending some time again with you real soon. Take good care.